All right, guys, what's going on? It's Coach Will, and in this video here, Greg Skelly is asking how to do it, paying someone to answer the phone. He says he's looking to outsource answering our gym phone so that he can do more uninterrupted, high-value thought work. The tricky part is figuring out a pay structure for such a thing, since answering the phone is, by nature, be available for periodic pieces of work, but not consistent or predictable work. Question, to those of you who successfully outsource answering the phones, how did you do it? What was the pay structure amount for that? Okay, cool. First for Greg, and for anybody else in our program, we actually have there's a training in our I believe in our sales modules about pay structure around this, but we'll just cover it here that way, because this is something that's actually popped up multiple times recently, like appointment setting and how to pay for appointment setting. Because in the sales world, you have essentially two roles that make a sales engine go, and this is what larger businesses deploy and smaller businesses can as well. It's a pretty simple model of just basically having a setter and a closer. Sometimes the setter can be the closer. A lot of times for smaller companies it is, when you only can afford to pay one person and there's not enough work to keep two people busy. Then you just have a setter and a closer, right? The same guy does the setting as the closing, right? As you get bigger and you scale, if, say, for example, if Greg here is the closer, which he might be, and if he's busy enough closing, he might decide to break out that appointment setting role and having someone who's just dedicated to answering the phone. So it really just depends on the volume. The volume of what you have coming in regards to like whether or not you should, right? I would say for a gym owner, if you're only getting, say 15 or 20 leads a month, I would say for you to do that work. And the reason why is because it's ultimately the further something gets from the source, the lower effectiveness there is, right? So when you hand something off to a well-trained employee internally, like say you hire someone in-house for a role and you do a 3-month internship process and you groom them over 6 months to a year, you're going to get results that are probably about 80 to 90% as effective as you. But there is going to be that 10 to 20% drop, right? And I can tell you that for sure because I've hired for sales now with like 4 different companies, 2 of them being gyms, and then 2 of them being much larger companies, one of them being Big Little Gyms, and one of them being a landscaping company, which we used to have 2 salespeople that went out into the field to bid projects. And in all those businesses, it was pretty much the same drop in effectiveness, and this is with really good salespeople. It's just no one's ever going to be good as the source, and you will lose people just because they're not talking to the source sometimes, right? So there's that, right? Now, if he used the word outsource here specifically, and by outsource, does he mean do that, hire internally and train someone up? Or is it like hand it off to like a call center or like a remote person? Now, if you do that and you do outsource, which what I mean by outsource is you do it externally, you hand it to someone externally, my guess, you're going to see like a drop to about a 70% effectiveness rate, right? You're going to drop. So for every 10 people you would have signed or booked for an intro to come into your gym, you're going to book 7, right? So another reason to probably go and stay internal with this, and I've answered this question many, many times, and honestly, like the most valuable role a gym owner can have is an admin, right? An admin person. That's probably like, at our gym we had a manager, we had an admin, and then the manager was also the head coach. And the admin, her job was basically to do, all the front desk work, which with any thriving gym, there's going to be enough front desk work between billing and chasing billing around and running attendance reports and all those things to keep someone busy for 30 hours, backfilling that with appointment setting, and then she would even help out with sales, right? So she would sometimes play the appointment setting and closer role, right? Now, paying on this role, how did we pay her? That's what we did. So we had someone at our last gym. This was a gym that we grew to 350 plus members, and in about a 2-year span, we went from about 150 to 350, right? So there were periods of time where we were signing 20 to 30 new clients up in a month. And at that point, by the time that had happened, we had enough going on in the gym to generate enough revenue to pay everybody to run all positions, right? And at that point, I had been in gym ownership for 8 years, so my goal was to step out of the day-to-day and have sales occur while I wasn't there. And so eventually she did do both appointment and setting. And then I would still share that role. There were still like 2 or 3 days a week that I worked that I did sales. And it was nice to just come in and sell and go home because it's like the dollar per hour was very, very high. And I would come in, sell in between sales, tighten up on any CEO type duties, lead team meetings, things like that. I would just batch all the work to be there at the same time. So, as far as what we paid her, it's very simple, right? Just, we would pay her like $30, I think it was $35 if I'm recalling, $35 per appointment set. Okay, per showed appointment. Whether or not we sell them. If they showed up, she got $35. And I was okay with that because we closed 8 to 9 out of 10 people that walked in the door, and we were selling a $300 to $400 front end offer. So it was very easy to liquidate the cost of the couple people that showed and didn't buy across the thousands and thousands of dollars that we sold. It was okay if people showed and didn't buy for the month. The two that didn't, out of say the 20 that showed up, we were okay with still paying her because we wanted to incentivize her to get people to show up. Ultimately, the question around pay plans for any business, not just unique to gyms, is always to build the compensation model around the results you want, right? Like, you want people to show up so you can sell them something. So structure whatever the job is around that specific thing, right? Now, she was paid hourly to work her front desk role, and then she also got paid for showed appointments. And then if they sold, she did get $50, right? And then if she sold it, she got an additional $10. We made it $60 if she sold it. So she got paid $60 essentially, and she was still getting paid hourly while she was doing that, right? Because she would be doing follow-up in between doing all kinds of other admin work. And she just kept Gymnetics open on her screen, and she had 2 screens. So Gymnetics was always open on one screen, and as things came in, like she was getting the pings on her phone, the other screen was going off, and she was working on other things like billing things, ordering supplies for the gym, ordering toilet paper and things like that for the gym, putting in programming if we were asking her to put in programming, because that's what she did. She put it, like our programmer, if that was me, would give her the program and she would enter it all. There was more than enough work there for her to sit there for 35 hours a week. And if she was also doing follow-up during that, she was getting paid commissions on top of that. And then if someone showed up and she was taking the sales sit downs, she would also get paid on those. So it's a really simple structure. It's not super complicated, and this was 2017, 2018. So maybe in today's dollars, it's more like, $45 per show and $60 per sale and $75 if she does it, right? Whatever you want to adjust for, right? But if you're selling a $200 front end offer with a client, then like there's more than enough there if the sales volume is high. So I kept it pretty simple. Like, we don't need a super long, hard to explain, percentage-based pay scale and structure for this. If that job and position starts to scale up to where, like, you feel like that might need to be the case because the volume is getting so high, then you can readdress it, right? But at first, you just keep it very, very simple, right? Like, because we as gym owners read all these business books that are written by, like, much larger businesses and entrepreneurs that are thinking much larger in scale, sometimes we take the data and the scale too far for a business that's actually very, very simple, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, what we're trying to do is optimize for shows, right? So we make sure that the person whose job is to make sure people show is paid when someone shows, and enough to where it's worth it, right? And in regards to like that person working after hours for shows, that depends on who you hire, right? So we hired a money motivated person for that front desk role. And as a result, she would work the phones in her off hours, even though she wasn't being paid hourly. So we would tell her, like, hey, you're being paid for these 8 hours today. But you are still being paid for shows. So if you get someone booked at home while you're eating dinner and they show up tomorrow and buy, even when you're not here, we're going to pay you on that. And she was very motivated by money. And she was like, okay, cool. And so she would book appointments during all hours. So that comes down to the person that you hire, right? You're going to want to hire for a role like this, someone very money motivated. Now, that's how I would do it, right? Now let's answer the question about outsourcing and specifically about like doing it off, going off site with it, right? Like you can contract call centers. It's very, very hard to contract call centers that are going to do a low volume amount of work though, because how call centers make money is by doing volume, right? They're making, pennies per call and dollars per transaction, but they need like hundreds of calls and hundreds of transactions in order to make any real amount of money. So it's really, really hard for a gym to outsource to a call center. There are independent call centers that can do whatever you want to pay them to do. And they're going to tell you like, hey, you train our guy up, and then they'll come up with it. They'll come up with the pay scale. But most call centers are probably going to take a good percentage of your front end revenue if the volume's not very high, because like they're not in the business of like breaking even on like some guy sitting there by the phone all day, right? So that's the thing with it. Now, looking at some of the comments here, Greg says, I've already written the script for answering the phone and a scheduling system for directing phone traffic to the right person. I'm looking for guidance on the money side. Yeah, I would keep it very simple like this. Now, let's keep going here. Kevin said, this is such a good question. I'm not qualified to answer. What we did is offer one of our staff 20% commission on sales. He gets people booked into free trials and sales, sells them in person. Answering messages was consuming me. I needed some solution. We pay him $60 per week to cancel, pause, troubleshoot. Okay, I mean that's cool. It's kind of a little bit of a patch. I like the idea of paying per show and then an additional amount for sales. The reason why is because sometimes they may not pursue a follow up on a show, because we knew that there were people that presented themselves a certain way in the way that we did follow up that were challenging, in communicating with them online. But we knew when they showed up that we could sell them and overcome those things, right? So we never wanted to incentivize only if they closed the person. We wanted to incentivize for them to get the booking no matter what, even if it was someone that seemed like a non-fit, because like quite often that was not the case when we got them in person, right? Nick Olson said, keen to hear if anyone has done this as well. Will Hurst, have you ever considered a fractional call center model to have one person answering calls from multiple gyms? What's funny is I have actually thought of that. Nick Olson's a very entrepreneurial-minded gym owner, his own multiple businesses as well. So it's interesting that he's answering this question, because we've had many discussions about these kinds of things. And we have considered that, I'm not sure if that's something, again, there's going to be some loss of effectiveness with any third-party call center for sure. Considering we have a little bit more insider information, could probably train a little bit more effectively. We probably could reduce that gap. Something that we'll kick around and think about. Right now PLG is growing pretty rapidly, so it's hard to think about adding on more personnel for a whole new service and thing. But that's pretty cool. If anybody's interested in that, let me know. I'd be happy to chat about putting something like that together. And then JP is on the team here. He says, best way to do this is to add an additional responsibility, one of your coaches. This is assuming they pass the GWC. Okay, cool. Mistakes of giving pass. Aside from staff. Yeah, the only issue I see with that, and JP's point is great. If you have nobody else you can outsource to, then outsource to your coaches if you can find one that's money motivated. I haven't had a lot of luck taking service personnel in a business and mixing that with the revenue generation side of things. I found that in my years of owning gyms and then now working with several hundred gyms, the consensus seems to be the same across the board, that like service-based fulfillment personnel in a gym, it's very difficult to also get them. They're also often not money motivated people. They're service motivated people, which is why it's sometimes hard to get them. And it really depends on the dynamic, right? If this is a full-time person who's making their full-time living with you, I think they can become very money motivated because this is their sole source of income. But like taking a part-time coach who's operating in a service role of your business, mainly for their own benefit, like mainly because they like to coach and like they like the increased status of being a coach in your business, getting that person to come over and be like, hey, you want to generate revenue with me, like they're probably, like that can present a lot of issues even if you do talk them into it. Like I've had that go south more often than not. So, that's why I like it better for an admin role, because it lines up pretty well with like what they're doing at the front desk already. That being said, if nothing else, panel coaches for it, see if you can find something there. He said he personally has hired a VA and a salesperson to do this role. Ultimately ended up taking the role back. I tried a mixed pay structure as well, $10 per appointment that showed up. Okay, seems a little bit low. Maybe he was going for volume at the time. JP's done a lot of stuff, so I'm sure like he has reasons for doing it this way. I've done a flat 15 an hour. That is many hours. Yeah, it's going to be hard for anybody to be motivated by that. But I still appreciate JP sharing nonetheless, and I'm sure if he were to go back and redo it, I'm sure he probably, knowing what he knows now, might do it differently. But nonetheless, he's sharing what he knows there. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I've said this before, I'll say it again, an admin role in a gym whose job is to pick up the phone and do this stuff for you, they will 3x their own value, whatever you spend to them. They will 3x that amount of money spent, and the other 2x is revenue and profit in your pocket if you hire for it, train for it, invest that time, they become a pillar of your business, right? Like outsourcing is great once you have the foundational core team built of your business. And for a gym, I would say the core team contains a general manager, an admin, and a head coach who can also, head coach can be a dual role combined with admin or combined with general manager. You know, that's your core team. That's your point and shoot team, right? And their job, because if you're going to outsource something, someone still has to manage that, right? Like outsource, you know, if you were to get a VA, you can hire VAs on the internet. Like someone still has to manage that VA role. And if that you don't have someone managing that role to see if their numbers are good, then that person managing it is you, right? And when it's not going well because you don't want to deal with it, you're probably not going to handle it well if they underperform, but they're going to if it's not their business and they're not reliant. If they're a freelance VA, they can get a new contract for new work tomorrow and then your work becomes old news. And that's not uncommon with freelance VAs, right? Only time you really should outsource is when like the volume is so high that like you're making money on like a small percentage of the outcome, right? Like the reason why you outsource to a call center or like a offshore VA is just to pound the phones. It's a volume, right? If you're going to have someone call, you know, your 3,000 past leads for the last, you know, 10 years of business for the next, you know, 3 months and convert, that's a good use of a call center or an outsourced VA. But to do like the day-to-day inbound follow-up on lead gen, I don't think the loss in effectiveness and efficiency would be worth it to go the cheap route of hiring a offshore VA. Maybe AI in time will be able to carry full conversations using voice to where no one knows the difference, but I still think we're a little ways off from that. And I wouldn't want to be first mover on that. Again, considering the value of one client, like we work in a business model where like the average client value is very, very high and the volume is low, right? Like signing 20 new clients up in a month is considered high for a gym, but in business, it's very, very low. You're talking about one transaction one new inbound transaction every 1.5 days at that rate, right? You don't exactly need to build like a fleet of offshore salespeople to maintain that high level of efficiency at that. You just need one good internal person who probably works interdepartmentally in your gym. And honestly, like this is the role most gyms seem to overlook, is a admin, a hybrid admin follow-upper front desk person. And instead they'll keep hiring coaches and programmers and general managers. Meanwhile, the admin role is probably the highest return role for the dollar. So that's my recommendation here with this. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts on it. Would love to hear, ways that you've done it. Like I said, I've seen a couple gyms pull it off with a coach. They have someone who's a coach who also happens, but generally almost every time I've heard that, it's a full-time coach. Like that's their job. That's what they do. And they also happen to have a sales background. And so, but that's pretty rare. That's pretty rare. It's not that common. So I think that's why hiring for admin and training someone up and spending 2 or 3 months to intern that person to get them up to speed is an investment well made, because like that, we had that person on our team the last 2 years we owned our gym. And again, that gym went from 150 to 350 people because it allowed me to just focus on lead gen and driving traffic into that funnel. And then she was able to basically get them booked and sell them, or I was also selling them. So the return on, I think we paid her, she ended up making probably somewhere between 40 and 45K a year. And, that gym was $1 million run rate gym. But when she came on, it was probably only a $350,000 run rate gym. So we generated an additional, 600,000+ revenue of run rate, off someone that was pretty happy making like $45,000 a year, working 30 hours a week. If that is something that is daunting to you, I guess I don't know what to say, because it's like, yeah, is it more expensive than like hiring an offshore VA off of like Fiverr? Yeah, but you're not gonna do $600,000 in additional run rate per year. You're never gonna build that kind of efficiency with an offshore VA. It's just not gonna happen. So it's like the opportunity cost is really the loss, right? You're gonna pay that money either way, whether it be in hiring someone good internally, or you're gonna pay that money out in loss in efficiency on the conversion side by trying to shortcut it with like cheap offshore, or non-invested talent. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts are. Thanks, guys.